Right, unfortunately Tony's had to nip off for an important call, so it falls to me to introduce the next speaker, who is Jarvis.
Yes.
Talking about sustainable anarchy, which I sort of invented, and Ewan hates the idea, don't you, Ewan? From a comms perspective, he said you can't use the word anarchy. So now Jarvis is going to explain to us why we can use the word anarchy and what it can deliver for us. Jarvis.
Thank you. I'm not as tall as the other people in the room, so just to say thank you, Nick, and to all the people involved in this event for inviting me to come and speak. There's clearly a lot of love in here for Nick and Sustain, so you guys are going to be his influencers, his thought leaders, the people that are going to get this going. So, back him in stuff that he's doing. So I had to look up the word anarchy and realise that I've been an anarchist most of my life. But I just want to tell you what the dictionary says. What is anarchy? A state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority or other controlling systems. That didn't particularly resonate with me. It did a little bit. But the second piece about it is, and this is another example of anarchy, the organisation of society on the basis of voluntary cooperation without political institutions or hierarchical government. Now that really resonated with me. So, and then the other word is sustainability, sustainable anarchy. So what does sustainable actually mean? I mean, we all know in the context of being green or eco-conscious, but actually sustainability is the ability to maintain or support a process over time. So can sustainable anarchy be a thing? Jonathan, based on those two descriptions, yes it can. Ewan? Yeah? Okay, so right, I think we live in a polarised world. The other speakers that have been on this morning, Nick's ideas about the project, and Thomas, who was brilliant by the way. I'm going to explain my journey. I'm not going to kind of tell you more about stuff that's going on in the world, because you all know it now, but I'm going to tell you my personal journey. But I do want to just point out that the two main kind of anarchy movements that are going on in our country today are probably Stop Oil, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, you must have seen it on the news, and Extinction Rebellion. Now these are activists that are anarchists, that are standing up against a regime because they, number one, don't believe in it, and secondly, are telling the truth about it. But what's happening is these people are being titled as threats to democracy, being given huge prison sentences for standing up and telling the truth. That's wrong, categorically, strictly wrong. So we need to do something about that if we are going to support the anarchy or activism movement. I'm not going to go on about that, but I think it's really important that they are taking people out of prison that are criminals, some petty but some quite serious, to create space for what? To lock the people up that are standing up against the regime, to put them in, it's just ridiculous. So firstly, I just want to get on my soapbox and just say how ridiculous this whole thing is. The problem is, as Thomas said earlier, big business are controlling our planet now. It's not really governments, it's the organisations that control the money. And we are feeding those big businesses. There's been lots of studies done that if you stopped spending money with Coca-Cola across the world, the brand would die in approximately 2 to 6 weeks. I mean, that's pretty vast how quickly we can bring these systems down if we stop putting our money in it. So we're all part of the problem, right? So how many of you would identify as being a consumer in this room, just by a show of hands? So you would call yourself a consumer, is that correct? Okay, so that's a label theory that was created by an economist post-war, 1945, a guy called Victor Lebeau, created that concept to disconnect you from nature. It's worked. Look how many of you identified as being a consumer. You're not human beings that buy stuff. The problem is that we're not buying the right stuff, and we need to buy the stuff that is essential and not non-essential. There was a stat I wanted to quote earlier when Thomas talked about, in fact, there's a gentleman over there, you talked about everybody's buying stuff that we don't need. 80% of the products that we are buying today are non-essential. How do I know that? Because during the pandemic, when we only bought essential products, the economy started to collapse because we were buying 20% of things that we actually needed. So the whole economic structure system is, to quote Thomas over there, now, I love this model, Nick, because you are creating what Amazon have done is convenience. You are creating a system that is going to be as convenient as what we're already doing, and that is commendable because you're going to keep it localized. So let's just talk about how we can individually be activists or create sustainable anarchy. So this is my journey. I've come from advertising. I'm unfortunately one of the people that created some of these systems that we're living in. But I had a call one day. I was working for a national newspaper. I was creating advertising campaigns. I had a call from a Channel 4 TV researcher out the blue, sitting at my desk. He said, "Jarvis, I've seen you on another TV show. I think you're quite an interesting character. I want you to be on my TV show. I can't tell you what it's about because it's all a bit secret, but you are going to be sent to one of the most extreme environments in the world. Would you be interested?" I was like, "Well, is it Big Brother?" No, it wasn't, thank God. No, it turned out to be an eco-observational documentary. So on that basis, I was in. I had to go through loads of tests and psychological tests, and I had to have vaccinations and stuff like this. So I knew it was going to be pretty intense. Hadn't met the other people that were on the show. There was 10 of us all together. I was the only one invited. The reason I was invited was because, number one, I'm a signed recording artist and in the music industry, so I had a profile. And number two, the researcher knew that I was training with a female shaman and spoke to trees. So they thought that would be quite cool for a TV show to have this kind of musician that is clearly a hippie and a tree hugger. The fact of that training is that what I actually learned, although I do talk about talking to trees, what I really learned over 15 years of training with a female shaman in England, not this South American ayahuascan type journey, but more of a druid, pagan, shamanic journey, is I learned how to listen. Nature is speaking to us all the time, and the farmers will know this, but how many of us are listening to what she is telling us? None of us, which is why we have this thing that humans are calling a climate crisis. It's nature's way of getting us re-engaged with remembering that we're not disconnected from nature, we are nature. So wake up, guys. If you can do that in this moment, I can stop this talk and stop ranting. So let me just tell you how I woke. So I did this training with my female shaman. The TV researchers have called me to go on this TV show. I'd been through 3 months of analysis to see whether I was going to be all right and not break down on TV. This was in 2006. In 2007, the show aired. What happened is we were sent, first of all, on a blacked out coach, driving around for 2 hours. All wondered where we were going. Borneo, the desert, the Arctic, rainforest, like where were we going to be? The doors opened on the coach and they parked us up at Gatwick Airport overnight. So we all thought we were flying off somewhere. Doors open, piles and piles and piles of rubbish everywhere. Crapper and Sons will know all about this. It was a landfill in Croydon. Not sure which was worse. Everybody screamed, "Ah, where are we?" And it was really to highlight what is one person's waste is another person's gold, which again our gentleman at the back there talked about. So we had to live on a landfill for 3 weeks with nothing. So the first night they gave us a container to sleep in, and then from then we had nothing. So luckily, on the other 10 people, there was me, the hippie, there was a very useful person, a model, she was fantastic, there was, why are you laughing? There was a gay guy, another useful person to have on a trip. But actually, there was a carpenter and an engineer. I was the kind of, actually, the other person that there was this kind of very alpha male. So we came together, completely diverse, living on a landfill. We had to build somewhere to sleep, somewhere to shower, somewhere to cook food, and somewhere to shit. So we had to scavenge from this landfill. Now, because it was in the UK and because of health and safety laws, this was a set that was built right next to the landfill, but they had to take out, syringes and really, really dangerous things. But it was disgusting. To be very honest, the first 3 nights I couldn't sleep because of rats, foxes, and the smell. It was absolutely rancid. So luckily, the other people that were on it was kind of a game show type of observational documentary, because if you lasted till the end, you'd get paid some money. We didn't know that, actually, until we got on the show, so none of us did it for that reason. What was interesting about it is that we suddenly had sold our souls to this TV production company. They became our gods. They became our political leaders. They became everything that we had to answer to. So it was this real microcosm of a society. And actually, thinking about it, there'd been a tsunami, there'd been, New Orleans disasters. There were people in the world that were living on landfills. In Dharavi, it's one of the biggest industries in Mumbai right now. There are people who actually have owned that space. So I kind of thought that, this is an opportunity that I need to embrace. And luckily, some of the other people also agreed that they would embrace it. And we made a pact that we would not give the TV people what they wanted, which was drama or car crash TV. Luckily, about 4 or 5 of us made that pact. So we actually embraced this and tried to turn it into a real documentary rather than a Big Brother-y eco-observational type thing. So I was very, very lucky to be with people that had committed to doing that. Now, week 1, we were building stuff, scavenging stuff, trying to create an environment for us to sleep in. You're probably wondering, well, what did you eat? So luckily, the TV researchers had said, well, in week 1, we'll give them what an average family would throw away in a month. And back then it was in a year. Back then it was £440 worth of food. That's what an average family would throw away. Now it's closer to £600. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So we had this truckload of food that showed up, and we were all like, oh, this is amazing, and we built somewhere to make a fire and cook some food and everything else. Fantastic. Week 2, we were given the worst possibly packed food and what we now know as, what's it called? What's it called? Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah, ultra-processed foods. We were given that stuff. So it was, badly packaged cereals, packets of crisps, all kinds of stuff. By the second week, we started to feel a little bit toxic. We were having coffee kind of, anxiety because there was none. And we got to understand, badly packaged food. We all understand this now. Remember, this is in 2007 when it aired. And then the third week, which was fantastic, we were given what one supermarket would throw away every day in fruit and vegetables. It was 133 kilograms of fruit and veg. Now, remember, this is nearly a decade ago, so a lot of things have changed in that time. But the most significant thing for me was this. On week 3, the local dustbin truck went round the local streets collecting the rubbish, as it does in all of our environments every week, came and dumped its stuff on this sacred space where we built somewhere to sleep and shower and all kinds of stuff. I don't have time to go into the detail, but you can watch the show on For Demand. We had to dress up in protective clothing, in masks, in gloves, the whole thing. And our job was to siphon through what had just been dumped on our dump and decide what had to go to landfill, what could be composted, and what could be recycled. So we started doing this, siphoning through, getting through. After about 20 minutes, no word of a lie, I started to feel physically sick. Had a really bad headache, like the day after your 18th birthday. Felt, sweating, feeling nauseous, the whole thing. And so, because of my shamanic training, I knew how to release toxicity in my beingness. I'd been trained with these fantastic mystical skills. So I went and lied on the earth. I said to the cameras, I've got to stop. I went and lied on the earth, and I started to breathe, to gather up this toxicity, and then exhale and release it to the earth, kind of grounding myself, which sounds weird, but it works for me. So I did this, started to feel better. And then what I do is, after releasing, take a huge deep breath to revitalise myself from Mother Nature so that I could get up and be re-energised. As I did that, I heard these words in my inner ear. How you are feeling now is how I feel. I'm sick and I need you to tell people. I literally felt like I'd been spoken to by the earth. That was my experience. Now, of course, I had training in this. I'd spent over a decade listening to nature, so I'm kind of aware of this line of communication. So I cried. I felt like I'd been hit by lightning because it was a bit of a shock. It was like, it was quite intense. So I got up, committed to camera that I would dedicate my life's work to educating, inspiring, poking and prodding people to wake up to what we now know is a crisis. Back then it wasn't a crisis. This was about recycling, which, you obviously have a business in it. So I became a celebrity of trash, which is why, Crapper and Sons kind of invite me to stuff like this, because, I'm the kind of I'm the crapper guy, or the trash guy. So I think the point of that is that, because I committed to camera that I was going to dedicate my life's work, I knew about advertising, I worked in publishing, I worked in the media, I was a singer-songwriter. Everything I did from that point was about educating people, which is why I brought the subject up this morning. And you educate people through marketing, through media, through TV, through press, through music, through the arts. Luckily, I had some of those skills. So after I went back to my publishers first of all, and I said, look, I want to do something new. I launched one of the UK's first ethical lifestyle magazine. Then I took a 30% profit share with them, which was a pretty good deal. Took £180,000 of advertising because I was able to ring people up, speak to the MD and say, I've just been on this TV show, did you see me? And by the way, I'm doing this. So it was great. It was a good kind of profile experience for me. And the publishers then turned around to me and they said, this is a great model, we want to do it again, but we're going to cut your 30% to 20%. I was like, fuck you, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I took the model to National Geographic, and they loved it. And they said, yes, we're going to do this. So I launched the world's biggest ethical lifestyle magazine about 18 months after that TV show, called National Geographic Green. Some of you may have seen that. We had a 300,000 circulation, the website reached 300 million people. I was having impact. Now, why and where does anarchy come into this? So every single thing that we wrote about was a positive news story about organisations or people or communities that were doing something good for sustainability. Now that might not seem like anarchy to you, but it actually is if you look at it in comparison to what every other newspaper and media outlet was doing at the time, which is fear-based media. This was positive, it was inspiring, it was educational. So when I look back at it now, every single major news outlet, ITV, BBC, Channel 4, The Guardian, The Sun, The Mirror, all of them, The Times, they're all on my mailing list, still to this day, because they didn't know how to push out a sustainable story. Remember, the BBC have only been talking about, since Blue Planet, climate change for maybe 6 or 7 years. This was over a decade ago, so we led the charge. We made a difference. People followed us. I'm not saying we were wholly responsible for that movement, but we definitely made a massive impact because we were nationwide. National Geographic then saw that this was a good model and we weren't getting the subscribers and it wasn't very lucrative or sustainable, so we took the idea to The Guardian. We then published a magazine with The Guardian for over a decade. The Guardian doesn't sell newspapers anymore, so we now publish completely independently. And I have some of those magazines there. We publish every 2 months. It is a shameless plug, but the more you read it, the more you pass it around to people, the more you'll get educated about the things that are important to you. We've got 7,000 articles on everything from food to energy to cycling to activism, the whole thing. So do join My Green Pod as a subscriber and get your magazine free that will give you all the information. Shameless plug out of the way. Okay, so I think the point of this is that one person that has been inspired to make a change can go away and actually create huge movements of mountains. I am one individual. We're now two with a team, because my wife Katie, thankfully, is the editor and a fantastic writer. So any one of you guys can go out. If you know what you love doing, you can dedicate what you love doing to creating change, and then accept that that perhaps could be my purpose in life in this moment, you will probably have a massive, massive impact. So work out what you're good at, work out what you love doing, go and offer that to this thing we're calling the climate crisis, so you can be a solution to it, and we could solve this problem very, very quickly by being the change that we see in the world, as Gandhi has always said. So that's my story. There's lots more to it. How long have we got? 3 minutes. Okay, great. So what I want to do very quickly, this is 3 minutes before questions. So I wanted to give an example of anarchy that's going on in the world, apart from Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, because we know that they are, pretty significant. This one is, I don't want to scare you with this, because it could do. So be prepared. The headline, when I was doing a little bit of research on this, was the Meadow Mutiny. The Meadow Mutiny. Why a rewilding scheme sparked residents' revolt. Okay, let me tell you what this says. The revolt began with 60-year-old customer service worker Martin White looking out my window. I couldn't bear to see it, he says. So I took the lawnmower out. Soon, his retired neighbour, Gary Wheatley, 63, joined him. And then Dudley's husband, John, and then the whole street was getting their hands dirty, raking up the shorn grass and gleefully clumping it into wheelbarrows. At one point in the multi-day rebellion, there were 5 lawnmowers on the go. So this is a rewilding scheme that one of 5 councils in Derbyshire had decided they were going to let nature do its thing. And the residents revolted. Anarchy in its finest moment. The problem with this is this. Why did they need 5 lawnmowers? Couldn't they have all shared one? Now, this is the problem that we have. We want to let nature do its thing. Clearly it's very brilliant at doing its thing. During the pandemic, people that lived in India, 20, 30 miles away from the Himalayas, after 2 to 3 weeks of the pandemic happening, could see the mountains. They'd never seen them their whole lives. Why? Because the air became clear, the toxicity levels came down, nature started doing its thing. Remember guys, nature's been around way before we have been, and it's going to be around a lot longer than we will be. Try and reconnect with nature. You live in a rural, beautiful area. Get out, sit on the ground, get your feet on the ground, talk to the farmers. Remember that every single ingredient, every single material, every single computer commodity, every single thing you use on a daily basis in your outside life comes from nature. How many of you, when you brushed your teeth, said, "Oh, thank you, nature, for that ingredient"? When you put your shirt on, "Oh, thank you, nature, for the cotton and the wool"? None of you. Do it. I guarantee all nature wants from us is appreciation and recognition. That is the beginning of the anarchic sustainable revolution that we need. That's me, I'm Jarvis, My Green Pod. Don't forget to subscribe. Question time! Does anybody have any after that? Yay!
What position do you think the arts have in transforming the public's view of climate change and a better future?
The biggest one. Music, as far as I can see, there's been a soundtrack to every major movement through history. The Renaissance period, the Spice Girls period, Vietnam War with the Beatles. In fact, this time next week, is it Saturday? No, tomorrow, Saturday, I will be on the stage in Times Square with 5 sustainability artists singing a song called Save the World that I did with Greta Thunberg to raise money for Fridays for Future's mapper, the most affected people and areas, which is what Thomas was talking about, the global south, to influence people about peace and climate. It's the beginning of the United Nations General Assembly. It's going to be broadcast to 100 million plus people. So I'll be doing that next Saturday. Please do tune in. It's massive. Why? Because, you know, music and the arts bypass, in most cases, the intellect. We have to feel. So I think this will only really turn around by the movement of art. The difference with modern art is it's become homogenized, like all our cars and all our food and everything else. So I think it's the sacred arts that are really going to come back in. And yeah.
Because so many people are not so watching. I understand so many people watch it, feel it as their family.
Yeah.
And if you see your family being assisted, they're making their villages sustainable.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, it has started to. I don't really watch much TV because I just think it's boring. But you know, EastEnders tried a bit of that. There's an organisation called the Albert Organisation that, if you look at the end of a TV show now, it'll say a sustainable production. So they have. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of thousands of people over the years, hundreds and thousands of people, trying to do exactly that, bring the culture in. The thing about culture these days is, unfortunately, the people that are driving the systems, as Thomas said, they want a culture where people are too afraid to stand up and speak out. And we have to not be controlled by that system. So the arts, unfortunately, is one of those areas where TV is pretty controlled, news 100% controlled. So look at the independent news people, look at the independent TV things, look at independent music. There's a big revolution going on now about independent media. And you might not like some of it, but actually it's probably more honest than most of the bullshit you're seeing on the TV today.
A good question to ask yourself is, why did the Tory government spend nearly 10 years, more than 10 years, nearly 15 years, cutting the arts?
Yeah.
Like, just ask yourself, why would they do that? Well, because it's the way that we connect with people, with feeling, with emotion. If you get rid of that, then people can
Yeah.
control people easily.
It's very true. Any more questions? Yes.
I'm just interested in how you balance the good read news stories with not being fear-based media, but the urgency to act. It's like quite a fine line.
Yeah.
You don't want to put pressure on, but like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, so we're going to be going through all of that this afternoon. I didn't want to give too much away because this was more about stirring you up, so you feel fired for change. But we're definitely going to be going into that this afternoon. Great question. Yes.
Last one, I think, please.
Sorry, Tony. Thank you.
What do you think, Jarvis, about the idea that the most powerful form of anarchy is to embrace the likelihood that we are going to go extinct? And the paradox being that at that moment, we might find our most creative solutions.
It's absolutely fact. We've only ever grown through adversity in our history. The problem is that a lot of the history that we are subject to is not actually real history. If you look beyond that and look behind, in the cracks, you'll see other forms of history. Some of it is being unearthed now. Ancient civilizations, which were perhaps way more intelligent than we are. It seems that we are only going to wake up collectively through the most extreme scenarios, and that's such a travesty because we owe our kids a lot more than that. We can actually fix these problems today, but none of us are acting because we've got convenient lives. We live like kings and queens. We're going to wait till it gets a bit worse. The frog in the saucepan scenario, it doesn't jump out until it's too late. Let's not do that. Let's make a change today. What can you do? Go out and do it. It's that simple. Thank you.